All right, going down the list. Peter, you want to go next? I'll unmute you now. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Peter Smith. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Norwalk Arts Commission. I'm also own a small agency in this city, a design agency. Lived here my entire life. I think that this is a unique opportunity for the city to have a real arts district for the first time. It's all about critical mass. This space with SPAG and with the things that happen at the library and some of the, and Renee Soto Gallery will really give a feeling of an arts district, of a kind of a zone. It'll be a central, meeting point for creatives of all type. I see it as a multi-use facility where you could show movies some nights and have lectures along with them. You could have poetry readings or poetry slams. Someone could be able to have an individual gallery show. You could have a small quartet. There's a lot of different things that you could do with this space. And you could do it in a way that it doesn't compete with some of the, the other facilities that we have in the city. It's ideally located. It's a huge amount of visibility. New Haven has something like this called the Art Space, which really drives a lot of creative businesses in the city. So I wholeheartedly support it. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the city and creative people of all types throughout Norwalk. And I really would like to thank the developer for stepping up and helping the city, achieve something really fantastic here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. We have somebody who's on the phone. Your phone number ends in 873. I am allowing you to talk now. You should be allowed to talk.
Thank you. I have no comment at this time.
All right, thank you. Doug Stern is on the phone. I'm not sure if he's here. Doug, you can talk now if you would wish to talk. No? Guess not. Janet's here, Brian Candela. Patrick McMahon is on. Patrick, you can talk now and unmute yourself if you'd wish. There you go.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the CEO of the Connecticut Main Street Center, and we've been doing some work with the Wall Street Neighborhood Association and others. I don't have a particular horse in this race, but certainly it's time to move forward with this major project and get it taken care of. It's been an eyesore in the neighborhood. It's kind of been detracting from all of the other major things that are going on down there. And I'm just checking in to see how we can help move the Wall Street neighborhood forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Sabrina, is there anyone else signed up?
I don't believe there is anybody else. If you are participating and would wish to as an attendee, can you please use the raise your hand function? I've missed you. I know Adam Bovilsky is still here to talk, but if anybody else on the attendee list wishes to speak, please raise your hand now. Nobody has.
Hennessy, on behalf of
go ahead.
Proposed redeveloper, we do ask to speak. I don't know if this is the right time for us to do that, or whether you'd like to invite us under a different part of your agenda. But we do have some comments we'd like to share with you.
Bill, that's up to John, but I think you can speak to when the item's on the agenda as well. That's probably the best way.
Thank you.
Adam is the last member who's on the invite list for comment. So Adam, if you want to talk now, you'll be the last one.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabrina, and thank you, Brian, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak. My name is Adam Bovilsky, and I'm the Executive Director of the Norwalk Housing Authority. We maintain approximately 1,000 public housing units, including about a third of those are senior units. and another approximately 1,000 families we serve with vouchers, subsidizing their apartments in the private market. I just want to focus my comments on the need we have for affordable housing, which this project does a tremendous job of assisting with. We have 9 different wait lists. All 9 of our wait lists are closed. They're so long that keeping them open would just give false hope to people who are applying. Combined on those 9 wait lists, we have over 1,150 families, not including another 438 families on our Section 8 wait list, which was closed in June of 2012 and still has 438 applicants waiting on it. In fact, when we opened that list in June of 2012, we had over 10,000 applications in just 4 days. We took 1,200 by lottery, and the remaining 438 are from that lottery. All this to say that the need for affordable housing in Norwalk is tremendous and greatly outstrips any supply that we have. And I want to distinguish this property from public housing. Although the income range for public housing is rather broad, the average income ranges depending on bedroom size from 15,000 to 21,000. So although our family's income can, in some instances, get up to 60% of AMI or even higher, our average tenants are way below the poverty line and in a completely different economic category than those who would benefit from an affordable housing project like this. This project serves a critical need for affordable housing generally, but particularly in the 40% of AMI range, a range that public housing doesn't really address because we serve folks in the lower economic range, and our workforce housing doesn't really address because they are generally in a higher economic range. Thirdly, I want to draw your attention to the National Low Income Housing Coalition. They take a look at Norwalk's $10.10 an hour minimum wage and compare that with data on the market, which shows that the average fair market unit, that's in the 40th percentile, 40th from the bottom, you need to earn about $36.25 an hour in a full-time job, or $75,000 a year to afford those units in Norwalk. So if you compare our minimum wage to the living wage in Norwalk, you'll see that you would need to have 3.5 full-time jobs at minimum wage in order to afford a unit at 30% of your income going towards rent and utilities. And if you have a single mother with a kid or two, it's just an impossible situation without units like these, without affordable units like these. And finally, I want to point out that the 40% of AMI income of a family of 4, about 57,000, if you look at that number, 57,720, and compare it to incomes in Norwalk already, census data, we're talking about 31% of Norwalk households earn less than 50,000. So this is serving, a third of our population that without developments like this, if they work here or live here, they can't afford to be here without a development like this. So I'm going to stop there because I think I'm around 3 minutes, but I urge you strongly to support this project.
Thank you.
John, we have some people who just joined on the phone.
Okay, really quick, Sabrina, I just got a note from Darlene that she's having difficulty logging in, something about proper authorization. I don't know if there's anything you can do on your end to help with that.
I can resend her the invitation.
Thank you.
And hopefully that'll solve her problem.
Okay.
Let me just find her. All right, I just resent it to her, so hopefully she can get in. I know we already went to the 300 number. There's a 453 cell phone number. You're now allowed to talk and unmute yourself. (543). You're unmuted now. You can speak.
Hey, Sabrina, is it 543 or 453?
53, sorry. 453, ending in 453. Well, ending in 663 should be able to help him as well. I don't know what's going on. Six, 663, anyone? Nope. All right, John, I'm just gonna unmute everyone. You are unmuted. And I'll just mute.
You are muted. I've been muted, unmuted. I got two phones going. I've been trying to zoom in. This is Jason Milligan.
There you go. You're unmuted, Jason. You can hang up the other phone.
So, hold on. I don't know how to do it. There we go.
There you go. You're all set.
I do not believe I'm the only one having trouble to log in, evidenced by Darlene having trouble getting in. Is it my turn to speak?
Yep, go ahead.
I have a lot to say, but I wish I could be seeing who is involved at the meeting. I find this a horrible way of communicating, but I've got 2 pages worth of material that I'd like to read. The Planning Committee and the Council have been given an ultimatum by Citibank. After sifting through the 100 and something pages, they have that in there in their 5-page narrative. The ultimatum is approve this complicated project in a way, the exact way that's being proposed, or Citibank will sell the asset. I hope that you will carefully consider both options. The proposal includes a 5-page narrative with the following quote. This is the final and best offer that can be made. Should the proposed development not be accepted, the bank will be forced to confront the economic reality of having to sell the asset. The public and leadership have been given a very short window to analyze a huge, complex document dump. How can the committee members and the public possibly read, absorb, and intellectually opine on 91 pages of documents in such a short period of time? The project is too big, too important, and has too much taxpayer subsidy to approve without a thorough analysis. The only justifiable vote, given the circumstances, is no. Do not feel rushed or intimidated. We deserve answers to some basic questions. What does Norwalk get with this proposal? Is it a good deal? What must Norwalk give to this proposal? What is Norwalk not getting? What alternatives have been considered? When were other alternatives presented? Why were they avoided? Could Norwalk tear up the LDA? What would that look like? What are the arguments for or against tearing up the LDA? What other possible alternatives currently exist? What other interested parties have there been? How recently? Have alternatives been sought out in the community or marketplace? How? When? Where? Given the 2 options, to approve this plan or vote no, and Citibank will sell the asset, what does it look like if Citibank sells the asset? Are you aware of any buyers in the market? What would new buyer plans look like? I know of at least 2 potential bidders. It is possible to get a better project, faster, and for less money that also provides more affordable apartments than what is being presented, and with no government subsidy. There are several points in this proposal that stand out. $4.4 million of new Norwalk taxpayer money goes into this project. Norwalk has been spared to date, but this new proposal is requiring Norwalk to take $4.4 million of local taxpayer money and donate it to this project. That is after giving a free parking lot. The project also includes zero public parking spaces. The Garden Cinema will be torn down. McClutchy gets $9.6 million developer fee. 9.6. That's nearly $10 million in a developer fee for this project. The cost per apartment is $702,000. $700,000 primarily studios and one bedrooms. Consider that compared to the median Norwalk home is in the 400K range. There is also an extremely generous property tax deal that lasts 15 years that is extended to the 50 market rate apartments that they're building. The deal that they have on taxes is 1/10 of what they should be paying. They are proposing 151 total apartments with 4 rent tiers. Only 34 of the 151 units are truly affordable, with rents ranging from $1,083 to $1,500 per month. Those 34 are the only ones that are below market. The rest, 117 of the 151 apartments, are at or above market rate, with rents ranging from $1,650 to $3,002 per month. How do I know what the market rate for this area is? Well, I own a real estate brokerage company. I've been in business for nearly 20 years. I am one street away.
Mr.
My
Miller,
real
can you
estate
wrap it
brokerage
up?
office.
You're over 3 minutes.
I got a half a page left. My
No,
real
no,
estate
no, no,
brokerage office.
If you don't
It's less than
mind,
half a
please.
page. It's less than half a page. My real estate brokerage office handles between 200 and 300 rental transactions per year in Norwalk. I also personally converted the former Treasure House building across the street from POCO at 5 Isaac Street into 6 new apartments. We literally just rented the apartments in the past few weeks. We have signed 5 out of 6 leases. We have 1s and 2 bedrooms. Our recent signed lease rates on Isaac Street is the best indicator of what market rate is for the area. I received no special tax plan, no subsidy, no government assistance, and let's compare my market rate rents to POCO's affordable rents. 5 Isaac Street rents, 1 bedroom averaging $1,650 per month, 2 bedroom averaging $2,150 per month. You can view them on the data I submitted with my talking points. Their proposal submitted includes a narrative.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Milligan.
Hold on, I got 2 more
You have
sentences.
5 minutes, Mr. Milligan. That's unfair to everyone
Hold
else.
on.
that kept it to
Wait a
3
second,
minutes.
John.
Mr.
When I
Milligan,
was
all due
unfair,
respect, you're at 5.
I got 1 sentence left, John. I would be done already. Citibank, you have a choice.
This is
Approve this
unfair, Mr.
proposal.
Milligan, to me, the committee, and everyone else that signed up to speak.
John, give me a
Listen,
break, buddy. Give me a break.
All due respect, Mr. Milligan. the
All
way
due
you-
respect, I would have been done. I got
No.
2 sentences. Give me a break. Citibank gave you a choice. Approve this proposal, or Citibank's probably more accurate. Citibank will sell the asset. Please choose wisely. Norwalk can save $4.4 million. They can get a better project faster with more affordable housing, and they also can save the Garden Cinema. Goodbye.
Sabrina, is there anyone else?
Mr. John Levin, I saw you raised your hand. Would you like to speak? You should be able to speak now. John?
No, I was just anxious. I don't know if you
Okay.
I was anxious to hear the rest of what Jason Milligan had to say, and I'm glad that he was able to complete his statement. My guess is that there will not be a flood of commenters, so holding people to strictly to 3 minutes probably is counterproductive in my view. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
John, we have a few people on the phone still that haven't spoken but are here. If you're on the phone and you wish to speak, can you press *9 and it'll raise your hand, so it'll indicate to me that you would like to be unmuted to speak. All right. With the 800 number ending in 800, you have the floor. Hello?
I could add a few more words. I think it's awful that this is.
I'm muting him. He already spoke and used his time. I don't think there's anybody else who's on the line that has raised their hand to speak. And we are ready to move on, John. There's nobody else on the list.
Thank you, Sabrina, and thank you all for who signed up to speak. Provide us with your comments. Let me pull up the agenda here. And Sabrina, do you mind also pulling up the agenda on your side so we can go through all the backup as we proceed through the agenda? Okay, first item, well, seeing we had public participation and seeing the two public hearings were in specifically to the only two items on the agenda, I see no need to continue with public participation. So I'm going to move on to new business, and that's the, we'll start with item 1, administration. That's the approval of the minutes of the June 4th, 2020 regular meeting. I'll keep this simple. All in favor of approving the minutes from June 4, 2020, please signify yes by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes. Moving on to item 2A1, Community Development Block Grant, COVID-19 funds. That's item 1, advance the amended PY45 Annual Action Plan and Citizen Participation Plan for the inclusion of the CDBG CV funds to the Common Council for its approval, and authorize the mayor to execute any and all documents associated with the amended PY45 AAP to HUD and all documents consistent with the amended PY45 AAP. Would someone like to move that item?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sirenides. Brian, did you want to speak to this? Anything, any highlights you want to provide the committee?
Yeah, sure. So as you know, we received presentations from the applicants at the last planning committee meeting. This is for an amendment per HUD guidelines to our PY45 Annual Action Plan and Citizen Participation Plan to accommodate the additional CDBG CV relief as provided by the CARES Act for coronavirus response projects. As Chairman Keides previously mentioned, we were fortunate to have enough funding to accommodate all of the applicants. And this would effectively allow that to advance. This amendment would allow, or the advance of this amendment would allow for us to amend the plan in accordance to distribute the funds.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to call a roll call vote on this. Any questions for Brian? Okay, hearing none, I will now call for roll call vote. Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Sirenides?
Yes.
Has Darlene joined us? Sabrina?
She's not on. I sent her an email with an updated link that she can join with, and she hasn't emailed me back or joined.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The
And
phone
I'm
number.
also a yes, so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Brian, and your team for putting that all together. Okay, moving on. Item B, Wall Street Place. Land disposition.
John, Chairman, just want to note the secondary item under new business is just the authorization from the mayor to sign the agreements. I'm not sure if that was included in your first action.
I apologize. Let me scroll up.
Just the secondary item under community development block grant.
Oh, I apologize. Yes,
Item
yes,
two.
yes. So we're saying item A.
2.
I'll have it down as A, B1. Are we referring?
It's the A2 Advanced Common Council permission to authorize the mayor to submit waiver requests
I
related
don't
to the
have
CARES
that.
Act.
I don't have that, Brian.
Okay.
Does anyone else have that on the committee? Because I'm not seeing it on the agenda I have. in front of me.
Yes. And it's up on our screen right now, John.
Okay, let me get out of my PDF. I apologize. Okay. All right. Okay, I can't read it because all your faces are in the way.
Would you like me to read it, John? I can
Yes,
do it for
please.
the group. All right, so item A2 is advance to the Common Council permission to authorize the mayor to submit waiver requests related to the CARES Act CDBG CV program to HUD on behalf of the affected persons as identified by the CDBG-CV public disclosure forms.
Thank you. And to that point, have we gotten all the disclosure forms in, Brian?
Most of them, and I'll follow up afterwards.
Okay, you just need those before the council meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, someone like to move that item?
So moved.
I couldn't hear who was that?
I saw Tom's hand go up.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Okay, now we'll go for the roll call vote. Mr. Livingston,
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Keegan,
Yes.
Mr. Serenides,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you again, Brian, for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, and now let me get out of this. Sorry, a lot of screens going on. Okay. Now moving down to item B, Wall Street Place, land disposition and loan recognition agreement for phase 1 improvements. And that's item 1, advance the amended land disposition and development agreement, LDA, by and between the City of Norwalk, the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Norwalk, and POCO IWSR Developers LLC, dated November 14, 2007, as amended, and the proposed amendment to the loan recognition agreements. Let me just scroll down. It's quite a bit here. By and between POCO IWSR Developers LLC, the City of Norwalk, the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Norwalk, City Bank, dated November 14, 2007, as amended, to the Common Council for its approval, and authorize the mayor to execute any and all documents associated with the amended LDA and LRA as necessary to follow the proposed development by Municipal Holdings LLC to complete the phase 1 construction of the Wall Street Place project. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Okay, I believe we've got Mr. McClutchy, Mr. Hennessy, several others on the phone that would like to present to the committee and give us some information in regards to this. Am I correct?
Todd was going to present, I believe. Todd, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
Mr. Kites, this is Bill Hennessy, and I think Todd and I will chiefly try to present, but we'd all like to begin by thanking you for taking the time to hold this meeting. These are unusual times, and unlike others who find this frustrating, we greatly appreciate your going through the trouble of continuing to make government work for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm here with my partner, Deborah Brancato, who frankly has chiefly been responsible for most of the documentation that you see in front of you this evening. We represent JHM Financial Group, principals of which you know are Todd and John McClutchy, father and son team. And they, along with current owners of the property at 61 Wall Street, Municipal Holdings, a wholly owned and controlled affiliate of Citibank, proposed to step in the role of the redeveloper pursuant to the terms of the amended LDA that we'll discuss tonight. So tonight we're here to talk to you once again. We were here maybe serendipitously exactly 1 year ago on July 2nd, 2019 to talk about a proposal. We're here to talk about the revised plan, the proposed amendments to the LDA now in front of you, and perhaps most importantly to answer questions that you may have. What I've learned over the last really 2 years is just how complicated the history of this urban renewal plan is, and how maybe unusual the process is that has gotten us to the point we are at now. So I thought I'd take just a couple of minutes of your time to just give you, and I promise it will just be a couple of minutes, the last 16 years in capsulized form. When in the early 2000s, the Redevelopment Agency hatched the idea of creating an arts and cultural district in the Wall Street area. And in 2004, they adopted the urban renewal plan that's called the Wall Street Renewal Plan. The areas that we'll be talking about tonight are a piece of that. They're not all of it. They were designated as parcel 2A on that plan. And they were really the heart of the redevelopment portion of it. And it includes a piece of West Avenue, chunk of Wall Street, as you know, and pretty much everything that's around Isaac Street. And it includes this parcel 2A areas that are beyond what we'll be talking about tonight, and areas beyond what JHM is proposing to redevelop. But it took on back in 2004 maybe a much more aggressive appetite than the first chunk should have. That's retrospect. But in 2007, the late Ken Olson and his company POCO was designated the redeveloper for this parcel 2A. And it was divided at that point into 3 phases. It's the first phase of those 3 phases that we're looking about and talking about tonight. That phase, my light keeps going on and off in my office because we have these nifty sustainable things and I'm not in the zone. So I have a golf club that I wave periodically to make the lights flash back on. So I apologize in advance for that. So this phase 1 that was under construction was supposed to include 101 units, just as we proposed to do it now. It, as you know, had this untested in this market anyway, automated parking garage in the basement that was going to solve the parking problems for the building. There was about 12,000, 13,000 square feet of retail, another few thousand square feet of space that was designated as a restaurant. And the project, after some delays, was actually put in under construction in the spring of 2015. And what you see there now was built during the first let's call it 16, 17 months of construction, because in June of 2017, the project was halted. And it has sat there since 2017. It took about a year, excuse me, in 2016 it was halted. It took about a year for Citibank to then step in and get control of the project in the form of ownership. So they formed an entity called Municipal Holdings, and they accepted essentially a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and they became the owner of the property. So they showed up in mid 2017 and said, "What do we have here?" And they weren't happy about it. They had a lot of money in the ground. They had a building that was half built. They had this parking system that nobody seemed to have figured out. And probably most importantly, the phase 2 property, which was tied to the hip with this in a lot of ways, was not under their direct control. So they knew they needed essentially a workout plan. And they also, because this particular component of Citibank, which is their community capital group, is mission driven and designed, and their objective is to help knit communities together and provide affordable housing. They knew they needed somebody who could accomplish all that. They needed a special talent team, somebody that could do a workout, somebody that could provide construction, somebody that could ultimately manage and run the building, and somebody that could figure out how to do it all on a budget that would allow for most, if not all, of the project to be something that matched their mission, which was quality product, community building, and affordable for residents in a market that otherwise would be housing challenged. And that's why they turned to my clients, JMH, who they had long experience with and who have not faltered in ever delivering that kind of product. This was and is a mess in terms of a real estate development. It's a problem. Todd and John immediately, did all the normal due diligence, inspected the building and analyzed what worked and what didn't. And they quickly concluded that the automated parking garage just wasn't viable, wouldn't work, and they needed to find a different way to park the project. They turned to the phase 2 land and said, the logical place to put the parking is here. We need to figure out what we can do in addition to putting the parking. And they began negotiating with the owner of the debt on that land. But the owner of the debt on that land, while they negotiated and thought they had path to a deal, didn't tell them he was also negotiating with somebody else. And we all woke up one day to find out that a third party had purchased that land. And that's Mr. Milligan, who spoke to you earlier, some entity that he controls. So suddenly, here we are in 2018, and there's a big problem that we have to solve. We have to find parking in order to complete the building, and that is what put us on the path to talking to other property owners who could supply that parking. Another thing happened in late 2018, and that was that the low-income housing tax credits that were reserved by Citibank, or Olson actually, but Citibank had access to them, had to be returned or foregone because the condition attached to them that the housing be supplied within a certain time frame couldn't be met. They disappeared. So we're back to square one. We have no parking and we have no financing on that. In 2019, about a year ago, the problem was solved again by virtue of the fact that the McClutchies were able to secure 17 Isaac Street, which is the Garden Street cinema site. That cinema was closing. The Friedmans had owned it for many years. They own one in Stamford, as a matter of fact, which was closed at the exact same time. It sits there as a theater with a for sale sign on it. I don't think I have to tell anybody here, and just oddly, there was a big article in today's paper about independent movie theaters closing. From the Connecticut magazine, it says. It was in the Hearst paper today that I read. So this is a condition which wasn't precipitated by the knock on the door that the McClutchies put to the Friedmans. It was opportunistic for them. The theater was going to close anyway. And you have a letter in your package from Richard Friedman saying as much. So the proposal put to you last year was a variant of what's before you tonight. It's two buildings, a parking garage located at 17 Isaac that will provide parking to the building at 61 Wall Street, the partially completed building, which you see an image of on your there we go. Todd, let's hold that one for a second, or Deb, whoever has that. So if you look at the larger of the two gray blocked areas, that is the building at 61 Wall Street, and Wall Street is on the left-hand side of that screen. Isaac Street goes down the side there, and then 17 Wall Street is the nice rectangle that is a parking garage at the bottom, and that's what was in front of you last year, a parking structure that would serve the residential structure across the street. We took away from the public hearing last year that there were certain concerns about that plan that we ought to take a step back and think about. So the result of that is that the plan that is before you now is a little bit different. One of the concerns that we were told we should take into consideration was that there was no art component to the plan of last year. So I will explain to you what our concept of the art component is this year in a moment, but that was one of the takeaways. Another takeaway was that the property and the units, all 101 in 61 Wall Street, were all at some level of affordability. None were market rate. And we took a step back to think about that. We'll explain to you how we have addressed that. Another important concern that was expressed to us by you folks and by members of the community a year ago was that the building didn't look like it belonged on Wall Street. It was too modern, I think that's what I took away. Those weren't what the words people used, but that's what I took away. So we took a step back and we tried to address all of those concerns. So the proposal before you tonight is really for two buildings. It is for a redesigned building at 61 Wall Street. You see an image here of the corner of Wall and Isaac. And Todd, a little later, will walk you through some of the changes that have occurred and what we've done. Actually, Todd, is that, I've got the right corner, right? Can you see your screen?
Correct. Yes.
And then let's also, if we can go to the building in the rear, that 17 Isaac. We have that same parking garage, but we've managed to introduce market rate units by putting units on top of that garage. And it is a total of 50 units, all of which are proposed to be market. Now, I say all of which proposed to be market. We sit with Steve Kleppen in zoning. He said, you know, it's a separate building, and we have a 10% set aside for workforce housing, and I think you need to include some in that building. We're working through some of these issues with Steve right now, but that building will be either 100% market or substantially market. The other feature about this project is there will be 61 at-grade parking spaces at 61 Wall Street. And there will be the ability to build this project, this portion of the project, everything we are showing you in one phase, in one single phase. And the other proposal is that as soon as all land use approvals are in hand, the LDA is done, the financing is cemented, these clients of ours are prepared to go forward just as quickly as they can. I don't think I need to give you any further information about them. I know at least one of you, I believe, Ms. Smith, you went for a tour. I heard, and I hope you walked away with the sense that this is high quality housing of serving a very needy but very diverse population. I mean, every time I've been through them, I'm impressed by, you know, it's really a community. It's seniors, it's young people, it's what we as a group of essential workers. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I did, if you don't mind, Mr.
No, please.
Henry, I did tour the two developments in Darien, the Heights, which has been around for some time, and the Royal, which is the 55 plus housing. And I was impressed with the quality of what was going in at the Royal, because it's a new building. And I did ask Todd if that's what we can expect, the same quality at Wall Street Place. And he did confirm that it is exactly the kind of quality that we would see. It's not high-end luxury, it's good quality work. I was pretty impressed with that. And you mentioned, Bill, the sense of community. I really could see that commitment to the projects. And you know, it's certainly on these plans, but I think that it's something really special about the development that could be really a benefit to the residents.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
You know, I think I'd like to spend just a couple of more moments explaining to you those three issues that were expressed to us last time: the architecture, the arts, and the mix of incomes and what it really means. And then just maybe turn it over to you folks for questions. I'll talk a bit about the art, then I'm going to ask Todd to talk about the other two things, the architecture and the income limits. But we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would be the appropriate homage to pay to the arts. Now, there's architectural features on this building that would, you know, make it a little different than your standard building and create an opportunity for artists to display work and those sorts of things. But it was clear to us that folks wanted something more programmable within the building, a real use. So we have discussed with folks, and I think you heard the Arts Commission today endorse that the idea that we give them a space, essentially rent-free, for a term of not less than 5 years, for them to curate and figure out how to make it work. And our expectation is that it turns over and it changes over time. I mean, it might be a gallery, you know, for several months, and then it might be a performance space. It might be a gallery and a performance space. In talking to Jessica Casey, she said, you know, one thing that there's a need for is just space for startups that may be more business oriented. In other words, you know, you'd never want to let the space to a, you know, a lawyer or a dentist or an accountant, but maybe a graphic designer who's sort of at the edge or in between something you could call art and something you could call business. And maybe that's the right use. Basically, I think we know what we're good at and we know what we're not good at. And we're not particularly experienced in curating innovative space that goes by terms such as art pod and makerspace and things like that. But we know that there are people that are good at it. And we think that it's certainly a benefit to us and it's a benefit to the community if some of the space that's designated retail space is actively used and draws people there. Because in addition to the 151 residents of the 151 units, the businesses in the area that aren't our businesses deserve and certainly would want all that activity. All those people out there spending money, walking by, you know, the buzz, the vibe, the feet on the ground are the things that make this sort of arts and cultural hub successful. So we talked about two different spaces that could function as the space that we essentially donate for that term. Can somebody pull up the Deb, do you have it, or Todd, do you have the plate with the floor plate, I guess we call it?
Yes.
Yeah, there, we just went flying by it, I think, yeah. So one space would be right there, and that's the one we landed on. That is at the corner of Isaac and Isaac. And it is right across from where the parking garage is. And it's got on-street parking next to it. It's right just a few steps away from the building lobby. Actually, both building lobbies are nearby. And it's visible on two sides. We think it's great space. It's very, very visible space. The other space that could function is a little larger, but it's a little more tucked away. And we thought the space on the corner was the better space. So that's the one, the so-called space E, that we propose to donate to the Arts Commission. And we look forward to working with them. The only cost they would be responsible for is the common area maintenance costs and of course their utilities. They would be delivered the so-called white box, there'd be electricity and wallboard and things like that. But it'd be beyond that, it'd be, just space that is unfinished for a traditional tenant, but it might function very, very well as a white box for an artistic use, which tends to be more open and raw and cooler, I guess. So that's our proposal for that, and we hope we've succeeded in satisfying the community's desire and your desire. Now I'm going to ask Todd to talk a bit about the architectural changes and also the rent programs and the rent.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for having us this evening. We're excited to sort of be back here, basically a year from last year, with some changes. We took to heart what everyone had to say about the development. We really tried to listen and incorporate those aspects into the development that we possibly could. There were certainly things that we couldn't do. We tried to explain why we couldn't do some of those aspects, but again, we tried to to work with everybody and incorporate what we could. And the first thing that Bill has spoken about already a little bit, and Todd, we heard from Todd Bryant, we worked with Bruce Beinfield on, is the overall architectural design and making sure that the developments really fit into the context and character of the neighborhood and the community. We have made certain changes to the, in particular, Wall Street elevation by incorporating more brick and stone into that facade, which better relates to some of the other neighboring buildings. And the other big aspect was activating the streets. I know Bill touched upon this earlier, but activating the streets and making sure that there's going to be 150 individuals and or families that will have the opportunity to live here. Those people will be housed rightly with their income, so they will have disposable income to go out and enjoy the benefits of retail and businesses and restaurants in the area. And I can quickly, if everyone, it's this is your meeting. I'm here to present whatever I can. I can quickly walk through the programming of the building. I know Bill has done it at a high level, but I can quickly go through that, and we can circle back with two items that people have additional questions on. Bill explained to you, obviously, there's two separate lots, one being the east, one being the north. Here are their current conditions today. Originally, we had just a parking garage with no housing on it previously. Now we've incorporated housing into that. This is, sorry, let me take a little, let me run through 61 Wall, which has not changed materially since you've seen it last time. The basement space is still unoccupied space. There's some small amenity space, and the small unoccupied space, this is below grade here that you see, is actually above the other arts program space on the ground level. So to the extent that there is a need, a desire to expand the arts component, we actually do have that ability. There's a staircase right next to this. So if there's a demand and a desire and a business plan that fit properly, there's an opportunity to expand that. And that's really what we want to make sure that we do, that these ideas that we're bringing to the table that we've heard from the stakeholders in the community can be implemented and expanded upon. It's not just the sort of the four walls, what you're seeing currently. We have the ability to do much more. I think you have all seen the ground level previously. There is about 7,200 square feet of retail spaces all identified in yellow on the ground floor. And then there are 40 surface parking spaces below the podium deck. The first level above the podium deck is going to be all residential, plus some amenity space for the exclusively for the residents. We did program the amenity space here that is outlined in green to be really accessible between both buildings. And the reason for that is sort of twofold. One of the things we talked about earlier is activating the streets and bringing a life and bringing character to Isaac Streets and Wall Street. And one of the ways to do that is getting people to get outside, travel back and forth, not only use the amenity spaces within the building, but experience the other retail and commercial venues in the neighborhood. The third, fourth, and fifth floor in some areas are all residential units. This is a typical stacking of what they look like, combination of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And we'll walk through what we have of each and what the income and also rent levels are for each of those. Here are a few more elevations. This is the elevation along the long side of Isaac Street. Here's the elevation along Wall Street. And here's the other elevation along Isaac. The rendering we looked at a little bit earlier. This is taken into consideration many of the comments that we heard from some of the stakeholders and the folks representing the architectural character of the area. A stacking plan of the development. And this is the start of 17 Isaac. So previously, like I mentioned before, this was solely a parking structure. So what we tried to do is give this some more life, or the reason for the change here, genesis for this change was multifold. One was to make sure that we didn't have just a stark building on the corner across from a brand new spectacular 61. This is meant to bring additional residential bodies, whether it's supposed to activate the street and bring a combination of the parking resource that is desperately needed for 61 Wall, as well as bringing people to the 17 Wall Street. So the first two levels are going to be strictly parking. And then the third and the fourth will be a residential mix of studios, ones, and twos. As Bill had mentioned previously, 45 of these will be at market rate and 5 will be at affordable. Here's the elevation of 17 Isaac. I will put it in context in a minute of what you're looking at here. This is the full elevation of it, but we have to remember that when you're driving down Isaac, there is a row of homes along the left-hand side of the page here, and those will block your view from everything that you see to the left of the screening here. So there will be homes that block this view vantage point that we'll look at in a second. So this is more typical of what you'll see as you drive down Isaac. And the purpose of activating and providing that street frontage and signage there is twofold. One, we thought it was a good tie-in to the arts component for the Arts Commission, who can occupy this space. That does not have a tremendous amount of visibility, but this will. This will be their showcase as you drive down Isaac. And it will allow people to better experience and understand that there is arts opportunity and business that is happening on the corner of Isaac and Isaac. And then here is the entrance to the parking garage. The parking garage will be split up into, has the ability to be split up to some public parking as well as the residential parking itself. That will be controlled by a fob system, which allows cars to enter, whether they want to enter in the public component or the residential component. And that's the overall programming for the building. And we can go and take a look at the incomes and rents, if that's what we want to proceed to next. And let me see if I can just share this other screen here, which I am having a little bit of difficulty doing. Bear with me. Has the screen share feature, is that still available?
You should be able to still share your screen.
Okay, so. Apologize for this. So can everybody see that now? Which says workforce component. Is that visible?
I see.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So what we wanted to talk about here is the income levels and the rents that this housing will span. It's everything from affordable all the way through market rate. We want to make sure it represents the community in a better way and has the opportunity to provide different income levels. And maybe we'll start with the rents themselves. So we have 39 units at 40% of AMI. We have 32 units at 60, 35 at 80% of AMI, and 45 at market. And what that represents is rents for the 40% will be between $1,000 and $1,500. The 60% will be between $1,600 and $2,200. The 80s will be between $21,000 and $3,000. And the market rates, studios through 2 bedrooms, will be through $2,100 to $3,000. And the income levels for each of those are represented in the graph below here. So you can see that they're substantial income levels. So the 80% level is for a family of 2, which will be typical for, I would think, a majority of these 1s and 2s, is between $80,000 and $90,000. So an individual or a family making between $80,000 and $90,000 has the ability to be rightly housed here, at an affordable rate. And the other component, and I'll let maybe Bill, if you want to, or my father can also talk to this a little bit further. What we did is we pulled what some of the median incomes are for folks in Norwalk, and to get a better sense of how those salaries relate to the different income levels that we're targeting. So a secretary in Norwalk, entry level is around $35,000 and median wage of $43,000, which fits well within the 40% AMI level. The patrol officer entry is around $58,000, median of $66,000, which allows for the 60%, and the same for a teacher. So teacher and nurses. So what this really allows you to do is making sure that you have the ability to provide housing for employees in your community, that they can work and also live in the community that they're working so hard in. Bill, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit further about any of those components you think we should.
Well, I think what I hope that does is illustrate to you that there's a broad range of potential occupations that find it hard to live in our communities here. And the folks that spoke tonight from the Housing Authority, for instance, I thought did a terrific job of explaining the depth of the need. And this won't solve everything, but this is a great project that helps a broad range of people that need help with housing. And I think that's our point. I know one speaker tonight talked about who the big winners here were, as though Citibank and our clients here are the big winners. The big winners here are the occupants of the 101 off-market housing. Those are the big winners. And you can say what you want about the low-income tax credit program. It is the only governmental program that produces off-market housing. It's basically all that's left, and it produces a lot of it. But to denigrate the program is wrong, because without it, there's nothing. There's nothing. So I think this probably wraps up our presentation. I'm sure you have questions, and maybe this is a good time to turn to that, if you believe so, Mr. Kaites.
Now, well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time and for that very descriptive explanation and presentation. Is there anyone on the committee that has any questions for Mr. McClutcher, Mr. Hennessy?
I do.
Mr. Livingston.
Thank you. I first want to start out by saying that I had a lot of objections last time, and this is a great improvement. I mean, honestly, I think you guys have come a long way. I really appreciate the changes, the design. and all the other effort you've made to improve this project. What I'm struggling with right now is the fact that I don't have, unlike last time, we don't have a copy of the proposed terms of the amendment. We have a term sheet, which is vague in a number of areas, but we don't actually have the amendment itself. And to give you an example why I think that's important, maybe, Bill, this might be mostly directed to you. I think you know what the question is going to be. I think you all do because I've raised it before. There's a clause in the old amendment, which has not been amended in this term sheet, to the extent I know, which amends amends section 3.2. And just so everybody knows, so much of this project is geared off of when you get your final land use approvals, right? The timing is all set on that. And one of the concerns I've had all along is that we all know going into this, what's going to happen when. So we don't end up in another situation like we're in now, quite frankly, where nobody ever expects things to go south, but sometimes they do, through no fault of people or otherwise. And what I've been trying to do is to understand where those risks are and to address them where I can. And so let me ask you this question. And as I said, so much of this agreement gears off the definition of final land use approvals, which again, this committee hasn't seen, but it was added in the amendment. And it says for purposes of this section, a final land use approval, so I mean any land use approval, which is all the zoning approvals and the like, which has been approved as a final action and is not subject to any condition. It's not subject to any condition not acceptable to the phase one developer in their sole and exclusive discretion. Sole and exclusive. So if the zoning board comes back and says, you know, we want you to change the windows from blue to black, you can walk away. And I don't understand that provision. So maybe you can help me understand why that's in there and why you think it's reasonable for us to take that risk that you can walk away on a whim. Right.
So I think we all agree and we all understand that until the land use approvals are final, right? Final, because there's a substantial likelihood that somebody's going to appeal this. And by the way, we get it. We're ready for it. We'll deal with it, and we will prevail. There can't be any activity on the site. The financing won't fall in place. You know, we need to have a building permit in hand, have our financing, and have a clear road ahead of us to build in order for us to actually build. So I think we all understand and agree to that. And I think that the risk on a developer, the concern on a developer side is conditions get thrown at you through an approval process, which, you know, really just vitiate the approval, because something is done and it upsets the budget. And when the budget gets shaky, the deal gets shaky. So we can't assume the risk or have the risk that we lose control of the budget and what we intend to build by virtue of the approval, because the approval could be an empty approval.
If I can interrupt for a second, because one of the things that I'd asked our council to go back to your council with, or I guess you are that council, Bill, was, you know, if you put in, you know, some language, and this may be too legal for a lot of people here, that something to the effect that, you know, in your reasonable discretion with the proviso that it doesn't increase your costs. I mean, something like that seems reasonable and probably more customary than this. This was added in, right? This is not in the old LDA.
You know, I'm going to defer to my partner or to John, who.
Yeah. So Tom, there's been some updates today. Mario came back to us, as did Brian, with some of your concerns, and we did make some changes to the language, and it's very similar to what you just said. It's cost control as far as we're concerned, and it's a reasonableness standard, which I think we all agree to, which is what I just heard you say. So I think if you look at the new language, it may, they haven't fully approved it yet, but it's what we've proposed, but it sounds very similar to what you just stated a minute ago.
Well, that's great. Again, I haven't seen the language, so it's kind of hard for me. That's one of my struggles here, right? I mean, as I said, I think you've improved this project greatly, but you're asking us to approve this without having seen things like that.
If I may,
I'd like
just,
to echo Tom's concerns about that also. I don't know how we can move this forward without actually seeing the language that we are asking the council ultimately to approve. So I'm very concerned that we don't have this language in front of us this evening.
I made this comment on the one provision that Tom is referring to, and just follow up on John McClutchy's response. He is correct that the developer here did in fact agree to revisions that we made at the suggestion of Councilman Livingston to revise the language so that it was no longer based on, that provision was no longer based on the phase one redevelopers sole and exclusive discretion, but rather reasonable discretion, provided phase one redevelopers shall not be obligated to accept any condition that increases the phase one redevelopers construction or operating costs for phase one beyond a de minimis measure. Essentially exactly what Tom just referred to. So in fact, the developer has agreed, Tom, to the language that you just suggested. I just want to let everybody know that generally the way we operate is that we'll put forward to a committee a term sheet, and quite frankly, even to the full council for approval, a term sheet for most of the deals that go forward at the city, including a lease agreement. And then if it's approved, the parties engage in the process of drafting the agreement, which quite often takes a long period of time. And that's why parties don't want to engage in that process until they know that they have an agreement on the actual terms. In this case, what you have before you is the underlying land disposition and loan recognition agreement, which are very lengthy documents. They've been before us for many years and been in effect for many years. There's also an amendment to both the land disposition agreement and loan recognition agreement, which again have been in effect for many, many years. Also, what has been before you is a second amendment to the land disposition agreement and loan recognition agreement, which was reviewed at length, both the term sheet and then the actual agreements for the second amendment to the loan recognition agreement and the land disposition agreement approximately 1 year ago at a few different public hearings or a few different public meetings, both at the planning committee level.
May I have to interject here for a moment? First off, you did set the precedent with giving an amendment last time, and we have a bunch of new people on this committee, right, who haven't had the benefit of that. So, you know,
I'm not forcing anybody to take a vote tonight. All I'm doing is just trying to explain for everybody what's before you. That's all. And Tom, you have the benefit of, you've spent a lot of time. You also have a background as a corporate lawyer. You've spent a lot of time reviewing all the documents, and you've done a great job in giving us good feedback that we've taken back to negotiate the term.
We're losing Mario.
And Mario goes up
very
on a-
helpful. So I'm just trying. Okay. I was just trying to give the reference to everybody else as to what's been done by way of the documents and why you don't have the latest version of the second amendments to the loan recognition agreement and the land disposition agreement.
When do you think you would have those documents?
I think we have them actually right now today. We were going back and forth, making additional revisions as of all day today. And so I think they are at this point in final form. And what I didn't want to do is have them emailed to you at an hour or two before the meeting, because I didn't think it was fair to put pressure on members of this committee to try to review them. So if you didn't have them by this morning, I felt that, or earlier today, it didn't make sense to send it to you shortly before the meeting. So I believe they're pretty much done at this point, and could probably be emailed out to the committee tomorrow. But just so you know, the Second Amendment documents are very similar to what you had a year ago. There's basically some minor revisions to those documents based on some changes in the proposal and some additional language changes we requested, many of which came by way of suggestions from Councilman Livingston. But there's really not that much. They're not significantly different from the versions you viewed a year ago of that actual document.
Thank you. I don't want to monopolize things too much. I want to let other people ask questions, but I do ask one question for, I think, John McClutchy. a couple of weeks ago on a phone call, we talked about whether there's anything you can do to the exterior of the building. And I appreciate you can't change your construction schedule, but I understand you may have been speaking to Brian about maybe some sort of site improvements that you might be able to do in the interim. Is that correct?
No, I haven't had a conversation about site improvements in the interim. What we did talk about was the fact that just if you take a look at what the construction schedule will be once we start, we want to go in and make sure the inside of the building is secure. The next step is to complete the exterior of the building because we need to get to our rough electric, rough plumbing, and HVAC. And we can't do that until we have a secure watertight building, which means we need to have a roof on, siding on, and windows and doors in place. So in the sequence of events, it's almost the next thing to be done in the construction process. That is what we did talk about.
Mr. McClutchy, I don't think that's, yeah, that was not what he was referring to. And I let your son Todd respond because Todd actually was in conversations with Brian Bedoli regarding this issue the last 2 days. So I'll let Todd respond.
My mistake then. Sorry, John. It's Todd.
You're the wrong McClutchy.
Yeah.
It's the older one you want.
Yes, so yeah, Brian did bring that to our attention. We've been actually looking into different screening options that might be available. And what we really want to be able to try to do is right now, you obviously drive by, you see a chain link fence, an unfinished building, and then obviously the tie back on top. So we're looking at different options to potentially, let me just share this with you for a second. Can you see the screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this doesn't fully answer your question or articulate exactly what we want to do, but it gives you some ideas of some of the things that we are thinking about potentially being able to implement to better to spruce up the appearance of the street. In the utilization of different screening, it can have renderings of the development on it. It can have different views of activation of storefronts. And that's really what we are working on right now to implement.
And you would do that right after approval? I mean, sometime before you get the final approval, so to speak?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. John, I'll let some other people ask questions. I don't want to monopolize too much.
Yeah, before I wrap it up, I'll anyone else on the committee that has any questions for Mr. McClutchy or Mr. Hennessy or Mr. McClutchy? No.
I think Lisa might have to.
I've got some, John.
Oh, Lisa.
I've got a couple of different questions. If you don't mind, they're sort of scattershot, but I just had some things when I went through the materials. So on the AMI, is this monitored so that under those units where they're designated for certain income types, that if people then start to make more money than what the requirements are, they then have to leave the building? Is that how that goes? Kind of like an enterprise zone situation, or how does that work?
So we did hear that earlier, that that residents, once they are initially income qualified, they are in fact able to remain in the building. There is a rule that if you make over 160% of where you started off, then you have to potentially either move into a different tier. So in other words, if you started off as a entry-level physician or a nurse, and you were making $40,000, you would have qualified for a 40% unit at the time. And if your income jumped up to $120,000, you would then be bumped into a different income band, which this development allows for. So
how is that monitored?
But you're allowed to grow, and that's the purpose of the program, is to give you that ability to grow and not be displaced.
So how is that monitored? Do you have to get everybody's income tax returns every year in some way, or how do you determine that there haven't been shifts in income?
So it's, yeah, every 2 years we have to verify incomes, and we typically get every other year because of the job we do in the first year.
And then the next question I have is maybe for Mario. The city of Norwalk has committed $4.4 million to this project, and I'm new to the council, so perhaps I don't understand or don't know all of the things, but I do think that there was some amount of money spent to date. So I think I had the number 2.8 in my mind, and I wanted to know what that was spent on and whether or not what's left and what are we going to be spending the balance of our investment on. Is there a schedule of what we spent and what we are planning on spending?
I know you addressed the question to me, so I'll start, but counsel for the redevelopment agency, Carolyn Cavallo, may want to chime in, as may Todd McClutchy on behalf of the development team, since both of them have been working on the infrastructure issue for some time. With regard to the $4.4 million, that's 4.4 million.
Mary, you're breaking up.
Is budgeted for public infrastructure associated with them here. Hello?
Do you mind starting over, Mario? I think we've missed what you've said.
Sure.
I don't know, Brian, do you want to give the framework for it, and I can speak to, I know none of the money's been.
Is everybody, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We got you now, Mario.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so with regard to the $4.4 million, it's an amount that's budgeted for the project. And we determined a while ago and confirmed that it could be used for all phase one if there's enough infrastructure, public infrastructure solely within the phase one project. We have not yet, the public parties have not yet confirmed or approved any amount of public infrastructure that's been spent so far at the project site. The redevelopment agency retained Ty and Bond, an engineering firm that has been reviewing all the documentation provided by the developer. And there's still this ongoing process whereby the public parties led by the redevelopment agency, along with their engineering firm, Ty and Bond, is reviewing the expenditures that have been made so far and that will be made for public infrastructure. But the costs, the 4.4 million can only be used for public infrastructure items, whereby the public parties have confirmed that the work has been completed. Anna, would you like to add to that?
Keep cutting out, Mario, but am I to understand that 4.4 has been put aside and something's been spent, but it hasn't been approved as against that budget as of yet? That there's a process to go to determine.
That is in fact correct.
And how does one understand the extent to which we've spent any amount? I mean, can you give us a sense about, what we're talking about as far as range of expense?
Sure. The city hasn't spent any of the money from the 4.4 and to date. The way it works is that once there's a certificate of completion issued for the work that's been done, as certified by by Ty and Bond, the engineering consultant, it's been retained to review the work that's being done. Then and only then would payment be made to the developer.
I think I'm still a little bit confused. So but some things have been spent, but we just haven't had them approved yet by the engineer group. Sorry, it's been hard to follow what you're saying.
Yes, some infrastructure has been, some qualified public infrastructure. The answer is yes.
Something's been spent, we don't know what, and it'll be determined later and come for approval.
Lisa, if I may chime in here, I work directly with Ty and Bond.
I'm sorry, it's really hard to understand what Mario's saying with the breakup.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yes, we worked with Ty and Bond to get what's referred to as an opinion of probable cost, where they went out and obtained the developer information on items that have been spent already in terms of utility or site improvements and the like. We have a total at that, but that hasn't been reimbursed. So the money's actually still in the city capital account. And we're working on the particulars of that with the LDA amendments, and it's to reflect that it's only to be used for public infrastructure expenses, which will be reflected on the Exhibit C of the LDA.
And then one last thing that maybe Mr. Hennessy confused me a little bit about. So that one retail spot is going to be given to the Arts Council. It's not maybe going to be determined to given to somebody else, perhaps. He was talking about innovators going in or, different things like that. is there going to be a 5-year lease with the Art Commission itself, at least? And that's for sure, or to be determined? How has that been, how is that going to be decided? And how would it be decided that it would go longer? The lease would be longer. Who's going to determine that space use?
Our proposal is to enter into a lease with the Arts Commission. And it would be their responsibility and their option to program the space and find the appropriate tenant. With and it's totally up to them. I suppose they could assign one tenant for 5 years, or they could have a rotating basis.
Okay, it was just a little confusing.
And I think as Todd explained, it has, that space has the, it's a little bit idiosyncratic in that basement level below it, but next to the stair, there may be an option if they're successful and have a need or a want to even use some more space.
Great. All right, those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I may also announce that Ms. Young has joined us, I believe, by phone. If you can hear me, Darlene, just want to chime in. No? Well, she let me know she was here, so maybe she is not. Sabrina, do you see Darlene here?
I don't, but I don't know what her phone number and oh yeah, I think I see her. Hold on.
Okay.
Thank you. No problem.
Welcome, Darlene.
Darlene in there.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions for the McClutchies or Mr. Hennessy or Mario?
Just a timing one. So if this moves forward, so Mary, you will get us the full amendment with the exhibits when? I know you're out next week, but somebody else can do it presumably.
Yes, I believe we'd have them to you by Tuesday, if not sooner.
Okay, with all the exhibits, right? I mean, I don't need the plans of the building, but the other stuff.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, everything will be provided to you more than 1 week before the full council meeting. The only thing that you haven't been provided with is the updated version of the Second Amendment to the LDA and LRA. But just to be clear, it's the same document that you had a year ago, just with some additional revisions as explained on the term sheet based on this proposal, which has changed since last time.
Okay.
And by the way, and quite frankly, just some a few provisions in which the language I think has been improved by virtue of, quite frankly, mostly Tom's comments to us.
Okay. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a couple of comments
Sure.
about the affordable housing aspect of this project, which I very much support. I supported it a year ago, and I feel strongly that our city really needs this this type of housing. You know, one of the things, excuse me, that I have heard against it is it's going to bring in new families to our school system. But I think what's more likely is that it's going to provide a decent home for already families who are already living in Norwalk. It gives them the opportunity to move out of a less desirable situation into something decent. And so, you know, families are very remiss to move their kids when they're of school age out of a town. So I think that this is an opportunity for our residents. And I also, you know, you already talked about in the presentation, the teachers. I mean, you know, I have many teacher friends who cannot afford to live in Norwalk. And there's a lot of people who, you know, who have decent jobs, but, you know, it's a very, very expensive place to live. And so this really offers housing for, you know, just regular people. So I really support this aspect of it. And I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other comments, questions?
John, this is David Huvelman. I know I'm not on the committee. I was wondering if I could ask a couple of questions though right now.
Of course, please proceed.
One is it's a public safety question I have. I know I see in the packet here the 53-foot fire truck study for making the turns on Isaac Street. But I'm trying to reconcile that particular drawing and study with a drawing later where we're showing angled street parking coming down Isaac. And I'm questioning the assumption that Isaac is a two-way street still. Is that correct in this plan? Or are we turning it into a one-way street? The idea of the new street is being removed from the LDA, correct?
Yes, we're looking at this as a two-way street, correct? Because it currently dead ends.
Okay, as a two-way street, then how does that parking reconcile? Because when I look at that, that looks like a single lane when you have the 40 or 50 parking spots that are angled parking coming down Isaac at that point. So I'm questioning when I'm looking at the footprint of this. Isaac is a tight street as it is. Now, looking at that, you don't have the parking drawn in. But if you go to your actually your next drawing, which is the landscape plan, we now have the parking drawn into that. I don't know what the plate number is on it.
So here's the actual site plan. So the angled parking is along Wall Street, which exists today.
Not on Wall Street, on Isaac Street. You have indicated angled parking on Isaac Street. And it looks like at that point, you're only looking at a single lane of traffic with the angled parking on Isaac.
Can you view this okay? That's on the screen right now.
Well, that looks like parallel parking. I'm looking at another plate drawing. It's called landscape plan. Also, if you look at your drawing north first floor plan.
Yeah, so I apologize. There probably is an inconsistency between the architectural plans and the site plans. The site plan is illustrated on the one that this one right here.
So you're looking at parallel parking in there in order to achieve a two-way traffic on Isaac Street.
That's correct.
Okay, it's not the angle parking that's in one of the other, that's conceptual then.
Correct, parallel on Isaac.
My concern is that turn, and I see the study done for the 53-foot truck, but that we're really taking into consideration any sort of emergency vehicle that has to get back into there, and then also just regular daily traffic through that street as it maintains a two-way traffic.
Yes, and we have had our engineer take a look at that to maintain the two-way traffic as well as provide the parallel on this portion of Isaac. There is no parking on the most southern portion of Isaac, again, to allow more flexibility for traffic to travel through there.
Okay. The next question I had was just real brief, and it has to do with the arts component of this. In your basement plan, you show that huge amount of unoccupied space. Now, I'm assuming that this unoccupied space, are we building into the design not just the unoccupied space that's right next to what would be the arts, the 900 square foot, arts space, but this larger unoccupied space down below, that there's proper access and egress points that later, if that area wanted to be developed into, for sake of a black box theater or some sort of small performance space, that we're thinking ahead in those terms, and that we're not having to reinvent the wheel if we suddenly, if this becomes the vibrant art area that we were all hoping that we can sort of create from this. Are we thinking about that in the conceptual design?
Yes, I can respond to that. And the answer is yes to all of that. And we want this to be a vibrant area. We want to be able to occupy additional space and grow the arts component to this redevelopment. As you can see, if you can see the plan that's on the screen right now, there are stairs, so emergency access for the most basement ground for the basement area. A portion of it is currently programmed for amenity space for the residents, but there's still a tremendous amount of unoccupied, underutilized space that could potentially be accessed later on. And again, there are elevators and stairs.
Elevators also. Okay, thank you. That was my question. That's really it, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, I'll close up by saying, I think I've learned the meaning of patience with this project. That is surely without a doubt. I think nearly after 6 years of ups and downs, negotiations back and forth, about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we had a very promising project in front of us, a project with a few asks that the council put upon Mr. McClutchy and Citibank. And I feel at this point, you've not only obliged those asks, but you've surpassed them. And I want to thank you for that, actually. And I know personally, I committed to the McClutchy Citibank and to this project that these asks were brought to fruition, that I would support it. And I'm a man of my word, and that still stands. And we've made lemonade out of lemons. I mean, this project is from what it was into what it is now. I know there's going to be a lot of folks that are really busy on Facebook right now saying otherwise, but someone that's been involved in this project for almost 8 years, I can say this is more than I could ever have imagined. So, and also to that point, I do believe the council as a whole should have the time to weigh in and deliberate and see what we've seen. So that being said, I will now call for a roll call vote to move this item to the full council. Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, I'm going to say I am going to vote to move this forward. I just want to say that it's, don't yell at me next meeting if I have questions on the amendment, because that's going to be certainly a condition in my final approval, but yes, move it forward.
Ms. Shanahan.
Yes, move it forward.
Ms. Shanahan.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Keegan.
Yes.
Mr. Sirenides.
Yes.
Ms. Young. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I yes.
Yes.
As long as there's, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Young. And I am also yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, committee. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you very much.
And to be continued. And now, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Lisa. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Good night.
Thank
Fourth
you,
of July.
everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.